since the beginning of May. The refugees in question had spent the preceding 2 months living in the hills in Kosovo. He pointed out, however, that the refugees who are settling in the Kukes refugee camp are not necessarily safe because of the proximity of the camp itself to the border of Kosovo. He also announced that the government in Skopje, the capital Skopje, has said a provisional yes to the construction of 2 more camps. Mr. Shea is now taking questions from journalists in the auditorium at NATO headquarters in Brussels. Let's cross over and have a listen to what he's saying.
In Kosovo over the last year, you would not be surprised to discover that a certain number of Kosovar Albanians, on whatever charges they managed to come up with, would be detained. I imagine that's a feature of police stations and MUP headquarters right across Kosovo, quite frankly. But there's a difference between that and saying that this was a prison which still contained all of the hundreds or thousands of inmates, which would have been the case under normal circumstances. But having said that, obviously, to the extent we learn more, we will give more. Now, as for your question, I noted the remarks of the commander of A4. I believe that what we are looking at is a situation where clearly, as soon as the crisis in Kosovo is finished, we can start returning the bulk of the refugees rather quickly. They want to go home, point one. Secondly, this is not a Bosnia-type situation of having to put people back into communities which are going to reject them. In other words, a kind of where the ethnic heart transplant isn't going to work. No, we don't face that problem, fortunately, in Kosovo. The third thing is most of them are staying quite local, and therefore the distances to be travelled are fairly slight. They may be deterred, of course, from the problem of reconstructing their homes or whatever, and that's where the international community is to get behind it. However, a number of refugees, even before the temporary evacuations have taken place, have in fact gone elsewhere in the world. In fact, well over 100,000, even before the temporary evacuation program began, had already gone off to wherever, Germany or Switzerland or France or wherever, because of family connections. And of course, it may take more time to get those people to go back. We're dealing with so many refugees that that General Reef is correct. It's difficult to believe that all of them can be back within 3 or 4 months, but that's not the objective. The objective is to get the bulk of them back and to re-establish the principle of the return of refugees, the right of return, and to re-establish the principle of a multi-ethnic Kosovo.
Get back as the Serb forces pull out.
Others have been more open about the political thinking.
And one of the very important factors for the diplomatic track is that Milosevic knows that he's getting weaker. He's lost 1/3 of his equipment and vehicles in Kosovo from the air campaign. He's lost actually half the ammunition which we've blown up. And at the same time, he can see NATO getting stronger. That's an equation that is bound to push further and further to him accepting our objectives.
Daylight showed that NATO had pressed that strategy ever harder, with a record 700 sorties. They included renewed attacks on buildings at Ishtok in Kosovo. NATO said it was a security complex. The Serbs said it was a prison. It provoked more criticism of NATO's targeting.
These so-called mistakes occur now daily, and the only way to stop this tragedy is to stop the bombing and to start concentrating on the efforts to achieve political settlement.
But whatever the state of diplomacy, a senior NATO official has warned it could take up to 2 years to return all Kosovan refugees. More Kosovans are now being moved from the Albanian border to refugee camps further south, further from their homes and into an uncertain future. John Lyne, BBC News.
This man said he'd seen 2 graves in Suarek containing 150 massacre victims. Another woman said she'd been hiding in the mountains for 2 months after police came and set fire to her village. Their reports have not been confirmed. After spending the night in temporary accommodation in Kukes, the refugees boarded trucks early Saturday morning. The convoys were bound for NATO-run camps in the south of the country. The camp at Kukes is full, and the UN is trying to discourage further settlement of refugees there.
Assessed damage in Podujevo, a few kilometers from the provincial capital, Pristina. The streets are empty, the houses uninhabitable. UN staff are collecting information on the humanitarian situation by talking to people still in Kosovo and finding out what their most urgent needs are. The delegation hopes to establish what measures will be necessary to rebuild the province after the war.
Well, in charge of the refugees in Albania has said it'll take at least 2 years for them all to return to Kosovo because of the damage inflicted by the Serbian forces there.
On one of the heaviest nights of bombing, NATO again used one of its most destructive weapons. This is the result of a graphite bomb. The weapon short-circuited electricity supplies, blacking out much of the country. By daylight, the extent of the devastation became clear. As well as the military impact, this will have brought home to the whole of the country the power of NATO's campaign. But there's also been another mistake, one of NATO's most embarrassing so far. NATO bombs struck a former Serb barracks at Kosova in Kosovo. It was long since captured by the Kosovo Liberation Army, also known as the UCK. Western journalists have even been shown round, but the message apparently didn't get through to NATO.
If we had known in a very dynamic situation, particularly where the UCK is extremely active in that part, that it had been captured by the UCK, then it would have been taken off the target list.
In Macedonia, the NATO troops training for a peace implementation force are now to be considerably strengthened. It looks like another way of putting pressure on President Milosevic, though the NATO allies insist there's no change in strategy.
NATO, as I said yesterday, is currently planning for success. Next week, the North Atlantic Council in Brussels will consider proposals to send an enhanced peacekeeping force into the area. This will enable peacekeepers to enter Kosovo quickly after a peace agreement is achieved that incorporates NATO's 5 conditions.
The issue of a peacekeeping force and who'd be in it was also discussed by the UN Secretary-General and the Finnish President Martti Ahtisaari, who's one of many mediators trying to speed a diplomatic solution.
The composition of the military component and of force, it's not a political issue. It's in the first instance, it is a practical issue. What sort of composition will actually achieve what we are trying to achieve?
But the only thing approaching an international presence at the moment is the UN humanitarian team, continuing its exploratory mission in Kosovo. And with the diplomacy moving at a snail's pace, there's no immediate prospect of any change. John Line, BBC News.
A new wave of refugees from Kosovo is crossing into Macedonia and Albania. Many hundreds of people have been crossing the Macedonian border during the day, and the United Nations expects up to 5,000 to have come over in the last 24 hours. The general in charge of NATO's humanitarian operations in Albania has warned that it could take up to 2 years to return all refugees to Kosovo, even if there's a peace settlement soon. Lieutenant General John Reith said the main obstacle was the scale of destruction that Serb forces have inflicted on the villages and homes of the Kosovo Albanians. Our World Affairs correspondent Kevin Connolly reports now on the continuing efforts to find a way to get the refugees home.
The camps along Albania's frontier with Kosovo have a depressing air of semi-permanence about them. NATO wants to move the refugees further from the border because it says here they're in danger, in range of Serb artillery.
I don't want a humanitarian disaster where the Serbs shell one of the refugee camps, because of course tents in the open, there'll be no protection from the shrapnel, from the shells at all.
But the general has other worries too. He's compared this refugee crisis to the one thrown up by the civil war in Bosnia. That took 2 years to resolve. Everyone in NATO agrees the scale of the humanitarian operation needed in this case is immense.
We're dealing with so many refugees that that General Reith is correct. It's difficult to believe that all of them can be back within 3 or 4 months, but that's not the objective. The objective is to get the bulk of them back and to re-establish the principle of the return of refugees, the right of return, and to re-establish the principle of a multi-ethnic Kosovo.
A United Nations humanitarian relief team has now spent a second day in Kosovo assessing what kind of reconstruction effort will in the end be needed there. But they know it's far too early to say. NATO has just completed one of the heaviest days of bombing of the campaign so far, and there is no end in sight.
Kevin Connolly.
إلا أن هؤلاء اللاجئين الذين أضحت المعاناة جزءا من يومياتهم بحاجة إلى أكثر من سقف يأويهم ووسط مأساة ما برحت تراوح مكانها. وفي ظل غياب أمل التوصل لحل سياسي سريع للأزمة، فإن تدفق اللاجئين سيستمر بسبب الجوع إن لم يكن بسبب الخوف والرعب.
على نتيجة محادثاته مع المبعوث الروسي الخاص لمنطقة البلقان فيكتور تشيرنوميردين ونائب وزيرة الخارجية الأمريكية ستروب تالبوت في موسكو التي جرت الخميس الماضي.
Belgrado, ormai è evidente. Pressione della NATO sul presidente jugoslavo Milošević alla vigilia dell'ultima trattativa possibile, colpendo la sua capitale. Le ultime luci artificiali che abbiamo visto sono queste, la notte scorsa, i traccianti della contraerea e le fiamme delle esplosioni. Gli effetti sonori sono il rombo dei cacciabombardieri che ormai percorrono il cielo di Belgrado a bassa quota e poi le esplosioni che fanno tremare i vetri di casa, li mandano in frantumi. Di notte e di giorno, l'ultima incursione in pieno sole all'ora di pranzo. Belgrado e la Serbia sono prive di energia elettrica e lo rimarranno a lungo. Non solo bombe tecnologiche che provocano un colossale cortocircuito, anche bombe vere e danni irreparabili per settimane. Belgrado ora è davvero una città in guerra, con i disagi e le paure che toccano la quotidianità di ognuno. Niente energia elettrica, non è soltanto la mancanza di luce, è il cibo caldo, se come in Serbia non ci sono le cucine a gas. È l'acqua che senza le pompe che la spingono non arriva più. Acqua uguale cibo, igiene, elemento essenziale di vita. E poi la comunicazione con il mondo, la radio, la televisione, ma anche e soprattutto i telefoni. Piombare di 50 anni indietro, insomma, senza avere gli antichi strumenti per sopravvivere. Peggio che le bombe, verrebbe da dire, se non fosse per l'imminente prossima notte di paura.
Ma gli intensi attacchi della NATO non hanno interessato solo Belgrado. I cacciabombardieri hanno mirato su molte altre località della Serbia, in primo luogo sulle centrali elettriche, provocando l'oscuramento del paese. Ma tra gli obiettivi strategici figurano nuovamente raffinerie, impianti siderurgici, ponti autostradali, depositi di carburante. E poi gli obiettivi militari, una trentina in Serbia, ma soprattutto in Kosovo. Veicoli e postazioni sul terreno, caserme dell'esercito e della polizia di varie località.
Essere pronto per terminare la guerra entro l'estate. In caso contrario, bisogna sempre in tempi brevi procedere all'operazione inversa, e cioè attrezzare i campi profughi per l'inverno. La morsa da cui è prigioniero Clinton nasce dai sondaggi che indicano come gli americani non vogliano vittime tra i loro soldati, e nasce anche dal semplicismo con cui è stata abbandonata la strategia della guerra del Golfo, per cui si attacca soltanto quando tutto è pronto per arrivare alla vittoria. E vincere senza perdite umane è una teoria insufficiente, come sembrano confermare anche le voci secondo cui l'elicottero Apache caduto sarebbe stato abbattuto dai serbi. La notizia viene dalla Germania, il Pentagono non conferma e non smentisce.
Storie orribili di massacri e violenza. A Pristina è ripresa la caccia casa per casa. Oggi qui sono arrivati più di 1000 profughi e 4000 sono fermi nella terra di nessuno. Molti erano i passeggeri del treno che parte da Orosevac, fermati ieri per 24 ore a metà strada dalla milizia. Dunque, dopo alcuni giorni di stop, siamo tornati ieri ed oggi ai grandi numeri. A Skopje e in tutto il paese cresce la diffidenza per i kosovari e la paura di quella che qui chiamano invasione demografica. Per noi, qui alla frontiera di Blase, si rinnova l'angoscia degli spettatori impotenti, mentre sotto il sole i rifugiati aspettano, appena usciti dall'incubo, per ore negli autobus. Balbone, profuga, qui da un mese, è arrivata a Blase con una grande speranza.
Mi ha chiamato stamattina alle 10 per dirmi che è partito, è salito su un autobus e sono qui che aspettavo lui, però ha richiamato poi a Tetovo, dove sono sistemata da parenti, che l'hanno fatto scendere dall'autobus, non so ancora perché.
They reached the Kosovo-Macedonian border in their thousands, the biggest influx for 3 weeks. Many were totally exhausted and dehydrated. They complained of being ill-treated and denied food by the Serbs as they moved from village to village in order to survive. This man couldn't contain his grief. His wife, brother, mother and father were missing. He said the Serbs were systematically clearing out Pristina. Another told us that hundreds of refugees could have died as the Serbs tried to use them as human shields.
1,500 of us were pushed out of a train and directed to a field full of tanks and artillery. But luckily, we went in another direction, because that night NATO planes bombed that field.
They believed that tens of thousands of people were still trying to escape Kosovo towards the Macedonian border. For now, Macedonia does have space in the camps, but conditions are poor. The authorities here will look in despair at these latest border scenes, which show that the crisis continues to deepen. These people agree with the Americans that there should be many more troops in Macedonia. They were promised that they'd be led safely back to their homes. Instead, they only see a road to more misery. David Crabtree, Sky News, on the Kosovo-Macedonian border.
Comprehension among KLA fighters that NATO mistakenly attacked this base that they captured over a month ago from the Yugoslav army. They've escorted parties of Western journalists around it and prevented the Serbs from landing so much as an artillery round here. But of what the Western media knew of the base, NATO seemed in ignorance. Unconfirmed reports say they've killed 7 KLA fighters and wounded 25.
The target there, which was struck by NATO, was done so on the assumption that it was still in the hands of the VJ, and subsequently it appears that it had been taken over by the UCK.
NATO has defended its attack on this prison in Kosovo, in which Serb officials say 19 people were killed and at least 10 wounded. The alliance says it was part of an important barracks and assembly area for Yugoslav army and special police forces.
NATO and the UN will speed up the evacuation of over 30,000 refugees from the northern Albanian town of Kukës to safer sites further south. Kukës is only 3 miles from Serb artillery positions.
I don't want a humanitarian disaster where the Serbs shell one of the refugee camps, because of course tents in the open, there'll be no protection from the shrapnel from the shells at all.
In Kukës, the population has swollen to over 100,000. Water's in short supply and it's polluted. The refugees will start moving next week to a network of 10 permanent camps run by NATO countries, which are being built across Albania. But officials are worried many will refuse to move out, further away from their homeland. Today's announcement came as 2,000 more refugees were expelled from Kosovo. They arrived in Kukës looking tired and close to breaking point, and bringing with them more tales of atrocity.
There is a pair of grave sites in Shwara containing 150 people who were massacred. I've seen it with my own eyes, and the graves are there.
My husband and brothers-in-law are in the mountains. We went up to the mountains 2 months ago when the police came and started to burn our village.
The US says there'll be a rapid build-up of NATO forces in Macedonia, which will be used in Kosovo to help ethnic Albanians return to their homes once the Yugoslav forces have been withdrawn. Gary Lloyd, Sky News.
Kosovo, the authorities are clearing up and waiting for the next air raids. A United Nations humanitarian team has at last been allowed into the province to assess the extent of the devastation. Kosovo is a partially deserted wasteland, caused by a combination of the military sweep by the Serbs and NATO's airstrikes. The UN were also able to gain access to Kosovan Albanian villages in an attempt to assess their treatment by the Serbs. Up in Belgrade, the capital was dealing with the aftermath of an intense series of bombing raids which hit the electricity grid, knocking out power. Much of the rest of the country is also without electricity and may be for several days. Killing the electricity is a way of partially killing the military's ability to communicate and plan, but it also, of course, strikes a blow against civilian morale and the civilian way of life. In this part of Belgrade, the power came back on just in time for the FA Cup final. Alexander Stojanovic had a ticket. He was going to commentate for Serbian television.
I am disappointed not to go to London to broadcast the match, but these things are lose on importance in days when your country is under bombs. I came here to watch the game, and these are the small pieces of normal life, you know, which we are collecting and try to live as normal as it's possible.
This may look like normality, but it's not. These are precious and increasingly rare moments. Tim Marshall, Sky News, Belgrade.
Manchester United.
These children in a UN-run classroom at a refugee camp in northern Macedonia are in their own way providing a glimpse of the horrors they've left behind in Kosovo. Their drawings on display at this exhibition show Serb soldiers and tanks, lots of dead bodies, and many houses on fire. This boy's drawing shows the body of his 79-year-old uncle riddled with bullets. The boy is too traumatized to be interviewed.
Machine gun, shooting the leg.
Arsim is 12. Here, he's drawn how Serb policemen shot his father in the neck and killed him last month. His home is on fire and NATO Apache helicopters are in the air, a little too far high above to be able to help. He says he wants to become a Kosovo Liberation Army fighter when he grows up, to avenge his father's death. Veso is 10. He was there when his village was set on fire. He says Serbs want to destroy what he calls the lonely people of Kosovo. But they will not succeed because he believes European countries will help people of Kosovo go back to their free land. So far, Kosovo is in chains. Dafina and her family fled to the woods when Serb soldiers came to their village and told them to get out. She saw a man being mutilated, she says. We spent 6 days hiding in the woods where there was nothing to eat or drink. Saveta has a similar story. She saw her village burning, although she admits that her house didn't exactly look like this.
It's the burning houses in the village and the Serbian tank attacking them and trying to destroy everything. So we have to run away and spend our lives in other people's homes.
The teacher says it would be comforting for these children to go back to their homes. But he adds the scars will always remain with the children because most of them have lost someone in their family. And hardest to forget, he says, is the loss of parents. Kapsel Najis, CNN, Tetovo, Macedonia.
Linie in Belgrad, von NATO-Bomben zerstört. Die Allianz hat auch wieder Graphitbomben auf elektrische Umspannwerke abgeworfen. In ihrer neuesten Angriffsserie auf Jugoslawien hat die NATO offenbar die serbische Stromversorgung weitgehend lahmgelegt. Die jugoslawische Nachrichtenagentur Beta meldet, in den meisten großen Städten, unter ihnen Niš, Kraljevo, Čačak sowie in Teilen von Belgrad, sei die Elektrizitätsversorgung zusammengebrochen. Zerstörungen auch im Kosovo. Eine humanitäre UN-Delegation ist erstmals seit Beginn des Bombardements unterwegs in der Krisenprovinz. In Podujevo im Norden des Kosovo findet die Gruppe unter Leitung des UN-Chefkoordinators für humanitäre Hilfe, de Mello, vor allem leere Straßen und verlassene Häuser vor. Die Delegation bleibt einen Tag länger als geplant im Kosovo. Sie will mit möglichst vielen Menschen sprechen, um notwendige Hilfe baldmöglichst nach Kriegsende organisieren zu können. Noch immer versuchen Tausende, die Unruheprovinz in Richtung Albanien und Mazedonien zu verlassen. An den Übergängen sind wieder mehrere tausend Flüchtlinge angekommen. Tagelang hatte hier gespenstische Ruhe geherrscht. In Kukes im Norden Albaniens machen sich die NATO-Militärs zunehmend Sorgen um die Sicherheit der Vertriebenen. Sollte die jugoslawische Armee auf die Idee kommen, das Nachbarland anzugreifen, wären Zehntausende Flüchtlinge in ihren Zelten den Angriffen schutzlos ausgeliefert. Deshalb sollen so viele wie möglich in andere Landesteile verlegt werden. Die diplomatischen Bemühungen zur Beilegung des Kosovo-Krieges laufen derweil über Pfingsten auf Sparflamme. In Schweden traf sich der finnische Präsident Ahtisaari mit UN-Generalsekretär Annan. Thema waren die Moskauer Gespräche mit dem russischen und dem amerikanischen Jugoslawien-Beauftragten Chernomyrdin und Talbot.
All of the Kosovar Albanian men, NATO never intentionally targets civilians. So I want to stress that the solution to this crisis is in Belgrade.
Have your say. Put your questions to NATO spokesman Jamie Shea on Your Call. Live from Brussels, Monday 4:30 on Sky News.
Anyone for tennis? Maybe a jump in the pool. Maybe not. Hide in a box? push the sister, carry the sister, or to the soccer field, not quite Wembley, but no shortage of skill. And home to Spartak committee, who coaches 2 children's soccer teams at the camp. No corner flags here, just a car, and the odd pitch invasion. 49-year-old Spartak from Tirana has been impressed with the refugees' skills.
When Kosovo came there, and the Kosovo people were very fond of football. They said to me, give me a ball to play. I gave to them a ball to play, and I noticed that some of them were very, very good. And they wanted to be included in my team in the coming days.
But Spartak is not just a coach. He has a unique talent.
I'm a juggler, and I have established some records in the world in juggling, soccer ball, and tennis ball, only with both feet.
He is, in fact, a Guinness Book of Records holder. On the 10th of September 1992, Spartak kept a soccer ball in the air whilst walking an incredible 11 miles in a time of 4 hours, 29 minutes, 3 seconds. So when did he start juggling?
I started it when I was about 8 years old. I used several types of balls, which were small balls, you understand? And I used a soccer ball when I was about 11 years or 12 years old, something like that.
By the time he was 14 years old, Spartak was giving his first show, where he kept a soccer ball in the air for 21 minutes. For a long period of time, he did it for pleasure. He then worked in the Tirana circus, but not just using a soccer ball. The tennis ball is Spartak's favorite, and in August '94, he established a world record.
When I maintain a tennis ball in the air, using both feet, only with feet, for 1 hour, 32 minutes,